Hello and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. Catherine Lasky, once again, an interest in the sea and born in the breezes. The seafaring life of Joshua Slocum. He grew up in Briar Island, which is on the Bay of Fundy side of Nova Scotia. And he was working, helping his dad. It was a fishing town. This is 1854. And boy, he could smell the salt there, and of course he could see the ships that were anchored, and including small lobster smacks to Grand Banks fishing schooners. Longed to be on one of them. Well, it's right. Where you grow up and what you experience sometimes can have a very strong pull on you. And finally, at 16, when his mother died, Joshua left for good. He set sail on a ship bound for Dublin. From Ireland, he sailed to China. From China to Australia. Many men and boys who went to sea in those days had little learning. Many were rough and brutal. Some were criminals. Joshua, however, was different. He had a real love of learning. In his spare time, he read all he could about the science of celestial navigation and practiced with the sextant, the instrument used for locating a ship's position on the sea by measuring the angles between the stars and the horizon. The officers of the ship noticed, and by the time Joshua was 18, he'd been promoted from common sailor to second mate. By the time he was 25, he'd become Captain Joshua Slocum, 25 years old. It was 2 years later in 1870, on a voyage to Australia, that Joshua met the love of his life, Virginia Walker. Virginia had been born in the United States. Her family had gone west to California for the gold rush in 1849, and then continued further west across the Pacific to Australia. Virginia was as tough as she was pretty. She claimed to have American Indian blood. She was an expert horseback rider and a crack shot with a rifle. She also loved fishing. Joshua and Virginia were both adventurers. They recognized this immediately in each other. Their marriage would be different, starting with a wedding. No long ceremony, fancy clothes, and big party for Virginia and Joshua. They dashed into a church in their street clothes and were married within a matter of minutes. Virginia kissed her mother and her father goodbye, and then the young couple boarded Joshua's ship, just in time to catch a favorable breeze and sail away. It was their honeymoon. Joshua had been hired to captain a fishing vessel, so they set off to Alaska. The waters teemed with giant king salmon, fur, seals, and birds. Well, they took to this life instantly, and later they would sail to Honolulu to board a new command, the Constitution. Now, it was on the Constitution that Slocum's first child was born. Another child soon followed, and then two arrived at once when Virginia gave birth to twins in a storm-laced sea off a peninsula of Siberia. In those days, however, Many children died quite young, whether they were born at sea or on land. The twins died in infancy. In all, Joshua and Virginia had 4 children who survived, 3 boys and 1 girl. The children did not go to school, but were taught at sea by Virginia. They studied reading, writing, arithmetic, drawing, and celestial navigation. What better math lessons could there be than the real word problems of figuring out exactly where the ship was in the middle of the Indian Ocean or the Tasman Sea by calculating the position of the stars. All 4 children learned to sew, for ship's sails were in need of constant repair, and the children spent many days on deck with their mother, an accomplished artist, drawing seabirds, dolphins, or playful fur seals that swam around their ship in the northern Pacific. Well, it's quite a story of his life and their life together. And when his wife dies, his children have grown up, he goes back to Nova Scotia and he wants to build a small sailboat that he can manage himself. His goal is to sail around the world alone. Nobody'd ever accomplished that, and he thought with his experience on all the different oceans and all, that he could do that. And he wrote about it. A wonderful book called Sailing Alone Around the World. He thought about taking a dog with him, but no. And then on one of the islands, someone gave him a goat and said, you need some company on there. But the goat ate his hat and his maps and charts, and next chance he pulled into a harbor, he got rid of the goat. But he did, have some nightmares and dreams and adventures as he sailed around the world. Quite an accomplishment. He set out in 1895. He went 46,000 miles in a little over 3 years. The proof was complete. It was a 34-foot sloop that he'd built. Now, years go by, and this book is the first time I hear about this young man's adventures. Though I think some people had been following him for quite a time. At 10, he gets a dinghy for his birthday, and he goes for his first sail. And then at 16 years old, I would think back when I was 16, he set out to cross the Pacific in a 24-foot sloop, so it's smaller than the Spray, the name of the boat that Joshua Slocum had. And he had 2 kittens. He came back 5 years later, 33 miles later, 1,000. What did I say? 33 miles, 33,000 miles later. I sometimes have to stop and think about what I said. This was done. He wrote it. I kept meticulous notes and wrote it. He wrote it with the help of Derek Gill. His name was Robin Lee Graham. Golden Press was very interested in publishing it, so they had lots of photographs. It's a feast for the eye. The places he went, he was not in a hurry. He was not in any race to be the first or to sail it the fastest or anything like that. He he was getting his education. Various Allens, different ways of life. I made a little note here. One thing he said, at sea, I learned how little a person needs, not how much. And I thought, boy, there's an interesting comment, a mature comment. Well, I'm sure he did mature immensely. When he came back, his story is he enrolled at Stanford and spent one term there. I can imagine being his own days were his own problem solving, what he's going to do, what it is, the things he had to take care of, the things he had to keep on top of. And now he's sitting in a big lecture hall and someone's lecturing, and he must be going out of his mind. Well, it would be quite an education in people of the world, humanity, how the helpful people were to him and how much he learned. And anyway, Fanny Flagg. I showed you this book before and spoke about it in terms of the women flying planes, fighter planes, in the Second World War. There were two stories going on in this book and how the stories sort of intertwined. Well, I show it to you again to plug it as a great read. But I also show it to you because this book by Michael McPorgal, who's written many books for young people in particular, has written this book in two sections. Oh, there's two stories. The story of a young boy who was an orphan in England. After the Second World War, there were many orphans in England. Dad had been killed, but place had been bombed, whatever. And orphanages were overcrowded. England put out a call for help, SOS. Can anybody take these children? And so some people in Australia responded, and so he goes on a boat, makes some friends, and the first story is about his life, young life, and his older life, and the second part is about a young woman, and it's got a magical sea voyage from Australia to to England, to the Allens off the coast of England, and then to London. I read the second story first, and then came to read the first story. The first story is difficult because it's the treatment of these young people was not as warm and loving as one would hope, especially in the group of these boys anyway. And the second story was so uplifting, so much love, that I'm glad I read it first, because had I read the other first, I might not have gotten to that second story. But as it was, having gotten to the second story, I wanted to finish that first part. So that's just a tip in case but that's just me talking too. I went through a phase of Gary Paulson, and what a writer that he certainly became. One of his loves in time, besides sledding with dog teams, was sailing. And this is called the Voyage of the Frog. So I think you might enjoy that voyage. Here's another voyage. This is called the Brendan Voyage, but it doesn't feature an Irish monk. What it does is it features Tim Severin. Now, Tim was an adventurer, a bit like some of the other writers here. Certainly Joshua Slocum was an adventurer. Certainly the young Mr. Graham was an adventurer. So he wanted to prove that a small opened boat could have gotten across from Ireland to North America. And so that's what his goal is. He had that kind of thing. He wanted to do where the Argonauts went in search of the Golden Fleece. He wanted to try to make a ship out of reeds and sail it from Egypt all the way to Central America. You know, maybe Egyptians came and helped people build pyramids. That's interesting to check. Check him out, Tim Severin. And thank you for listening to me. Once again, until next time, bye for now.